Okay, hi everybody. In this short video, I wanted to talk a little bit about narrative writing and what my expectations are for this paper. So you've probably heard the word narrative, but just to kind of explain what a narrative is, the Oxford English Dictionary says that it's a telling of some true or fictitious event or a connected sequence of events recounted by a narrator or a narratee. Okay, and so for this paper, the assignment sheet says you'll identify something you believe to be true and then tell a story about how you came to believe it to be true. So as you kind of compare these two quotes that I've got on the screen, this will be obviously true, so not fictitious, not made up. This is a true story from your life. And it should be maybe one event that has a beginning, middle, and end, but I'm looking for one specific story. So students often will just give lots of examples from their life, but I want one specific event. All right, and obviously you'll be the narrator. And so because this is a story about you, you'll be using I and me, which you usually don't do in a college paper, but for a narrative, you can. All right. And so thinking about kind of how to start crafting your narrative, you should probably first think about what belief you want to write about. So when you start kind of brainstorming your beliefs, I want you to be really careful and write down statements that say, I believe that, and not I believe in. Okay. So students will sometimes write something like this first one that says, I believe in the power of hard work. And that's a good start. It's just not quite specific enough for this paper and isn't going to give you the content that you need. So a better way to say that would be, I believe that hard work will make you a happier person. So do you see how that's a little more detailed and specific? That's what I'm looking for in your belief statements. Okay. And then I also would like you to be thinking about why you believe what you do. So be thinking about, I believe that blank because blank. So to kind of expand that example from above, you could say something like, I believe that hard work will make you a happier person because I felt happier after I studied hard for my ACT test, right? So I'm thinking about one specific time when I realized that I believed in the power of hard work. Does that make sense? So as you're brainstorming your belief and doing your discussion board post for this week, I'd like you to be thinking about number one, I believe that statements, and then also why you believe what you do and the story that you could tell about it. So let's start thinking about storytelling. Okay. For this paper, you're going to tell us what you believe and why you believe it, right? So the story of how you came to hold that belief. Okay. And that story can be one event, right? So the example that I've chosen is taking the ACT test in high school. And that's one event, but every event has a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. So the beginning of your story is sort of before you held that belief, and you may have already maybe known that hard work was important, but you didn't really have a strong personal connection to it. So that's the beginning. And then the middle is going to be the majority of your paper. And that's the events that happened that made you hold that belief, right? So I would be telling you about taking the ACT test and studying for it. And then, of course, the end is sort of the moment when you realize the importance of that belief. Okay, so that's sort of maybe a continuation. So you could say, after I got done with the ACT, I appreciated hard work, and now it's an important part of my life, right? But that's got to have a takeaway and an ending to your story so that your audience feels like it's concluded, all right? And when you're writing each of those parts, obviously the middle will be the biggest, but all of them should have concrete details. I'm looking for really vivid word choice and lots of mental images. So a bad sentence in a narrative would be, I was nervous about my test, but I did my best anyway. That's really vague and doesn't really help me imagine what's happening, right? And so a better way to say that would be to use lots of concrete details, like my stomach was nauseous, and I glanced nervously at the clock, and visualizing the notes I had studied, right? Those are concrete details that help me picture what's happening. And that's what we're looking for in a narrative. So when you start crafting your narrative and thinking about the story you want to tell and how you want to tell it, I suggest telling the story out loud first. If you have somebody you can talk to, like a roommate or a friend, uh, that's great. But even just talking to yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. Because a lot of times we're more natural when we talk instead of writing, and the ideas flow a little more easily. So I suggest just telling your story out loud. It may even be helpful to do maybe like a recording of yourself talking or a speech to text. We'll talk a little bit more about that in my video about the writing process. But I do think that when you're trying to tell a story, it can be helpful to talk first and write second.